As we wait for President Zelensky's address to Congress this morning, President Biden will announce more than $1 billion in military aid to Ukraine.
Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson joins us now. Congressman, thanks for being here. What do you expect will come out of this speech by Zelensky today?
Well, we're looking forward to hearing from him. Of course, there's wide bipartisan support for Zelensky. We're cheering him along. I think the objective here is that we need to do everything we can to help him protect the lives and the sovereignty, the freedom of his people without committing the U.S. to a war with Russia. It's a delicate balance, of course, and we'll be very interested to hear what he says about that.
You know, Congressman, this week the Biden administration came out and said that they're not going to stand by and let China help Russia financially or militarily. The only problem with that statement is that they are already helping Russia financially, increasing the amount of wheat that they're buying from Russia, oil. When Visa and MasterCard pulled out of the country, they're now going to be using a Chinese payment system. So the question is, should the administration already be sanctioning China?
Oh, absolutely. You know, our complaint with the Biden White House is that they've acted so slowly. They've shown indecision on the world stage, which, of course, equates to weakness, and we can't afford that right now. Obviously, the perception of a weak America is what has allowed all of this to escalate as it has. So it's time for President Biden to take a strong stand. In that same vein, when he goes to Brussels next week to meet with our NATO allies, he needs to pressure them. He needs to raise the pressure to all of our NATO allies to stop buying Russian oil. I mean, a lot of that is fueling and funding the Russian war machine. Germany gets 34% of its reserves, its oil, from Russia. So that's part of the problem. We need to take a strong stand. And of course, we've been urging President Biden to do that for weeks and weeks, months even, before this all began.
The president also being ripped for failing to listen or act on our border crisis here on our southern border as the February numbers shoot through the roof. For most of his presidency, Joe Biden has ignored the border crisis. But now, with his focus solely on Ukraine, has he forgotten about it entirely?
Well, he never paid attention to it in the first place, as you pointed out, Todd, and that's the problem. And we cannot lose sight of this open border crisis that continues to escalate with everything else going on. This is completely out of control. 165,000 apprehensions, encounters at the border in February. It's the highest number in the history of the Department of Homeland Security. It's the Biden White House and the Democrats in Congress who created this crisis. And you know who's paying the price? American families. We have rising violent crime. We have dangerous drugs like illicit fentanyl coming across the border. Drug overdoses are the #1 cause of death for Americans age 18 to 45 right now, directly related to this. And we've had millions of people come across the border, and it continues unabated. This is not a sustainable trajectory. The American people are going to continue to be outraged when they see the effect of this. It needs to stop immediately, but they will not pay attention to it, the attention it's due. They could reverse policies and fix this, but they won't.
You know, Congressman, we mentioned at the top that President Biden is going to announce $1 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine. $2 million of that has already been announced, so we're talking about an additional $800 million. And, you know, you can imagine that this might be the answer already to President Zelensky's request. So is President Biden going to eventually say, you know, no MiGs, no fly zone, but here is this money instead?
Well, that may be ultimately what he says. You know, there is concern. We don't want to escalate this into armed conflict with Russia. That's not something we can afford, and it shouldn't be our responsibility. But as we said at the outset, I think virtually all members of Congress agree that we've got to do what we can in terms of supporting the people, supporting their sovereignty, defending their freedom. This doesn't just stop at Ukraine if Putin does not push backwards. It will continue, we fear, and that's a very real concern. So this will be a very interesting joint session of Congress this morning. There'll be some very earnest discussions continuing, and I hope that we'll take the strong stand necessary to make sure we stop this bully, this tyrant, in his tracks.
Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson's got a busy morning starting in about 3 hours. We appreciate you waking up, being with us. Thank you, sir. And